ask how this affects you on a personal level, being so sort of linked into what happened all that time ago.
Well, I was a rescued child, if you like, and the personal level is I can only thank Britain that we were able to come here, and I was taken in by an English family. The gentleman happened to be the secretary of the Labour Party in Ashton-under-Lyne, and I have with me the label that I wore around my neck when I was getting on the train with my 3.5-year-old sister. I have with me, for people who don't believe this has ever happened, my autograph book that my grandfather gave me the night we were leaving. And I have with me a brochure where you will see a memorial to the parents who were brave enough to put us on those trains. The memorial which stands in Prague, which has little children's hands on one side of the glass window and the parents on the other, saying goodbye, probably knowing that they would never see us again.
How do you then feel when people turn around and say, I mean, 5% is a significant figure, saying either this hasn't happened or it is all just exaggerated? I mean, you can just dismiss that out of hand, can't you?
Well, you can't, but the interesting thing is, because I talk to a lot of schools, to a lot of children, to WIs, to Rotaries, all of them never ever have said it didn't really happen, because I have the facts to show them that it did.
And then, Laura, how surprised were you then by these findings? 5% don't believe it ever occurred at all, or there are numbers that believe that the figures are grossly exaggerated.
That's right. I think a very easy figure to get our heads around is 64% of people who we spoke to, who were polled in this independent survey, found that, or believed that the figures were they didn't know what the figures were. They either grossly underestimated or they just didn't know. So the majority of people didn't know the figures. And it's funny because, you know, we grow up thinking, well, 6 million, everyone knows 6 million people were killed in the Holocaust. And the level of ignorance is quite staggering and quite frightening.
Because we need to understand the scale of this. I mean, it's all about not only remembering, but understanding so that this cannot happen again.
That's right. And the prejudice that leads to terrible things happening is something that we still see around us today. I think that people need to remember that genocide didn't end in 1948 or 1945. Genocide continues today, and you know, we had the subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur and Bosnia, and we continue to have a world where people are prejudiced against each other, people kill each other for who they are, not for what they've done.
What surprises me, and again it highlights the importance of marking today, I think, Lady Milena, I mean, there's quite a very well-known TV presenter, I don't know if you're familiar with Rachel Riley, who does Countdown, has been in a lot of the papers this weekend because of level of anti-Semitic abuse she's had on social media. I'm always astounded that these things are still going on, how people can still be holding these views.
Well, I can only say that in my personal experience, I have never experienced it. I live in the north of England, and nowhere where I've been has anybody questioned my Jewishness. Has anybody ever said, you know, it hasn't happened? I can't believe that people don't believe it, but I have never personally experienced it.
Laura, how do you set about countering this 5% who are complete Holocaust deniers? What needs to be done on Holocaust Memorial Day? What is the step forward?
OK, so a few things. First of all, I'm delighted that Milena has never experienced personal Holocaust denial or anti-Semitism. I think that's wonderful. We know that the figures for anti-Semitism are higher than they've ever been recorded before. And we know that's in the context of all hate crime and all hate incidents being higher than before. You know, there's been a 70% rise. So we are operating in a world where this stuff is on the rise. what Rachel Riley's been saying is quite astonishing if you listen to what she said about the type of abuse she has been encountering. And if you ask me what people need to do about it, well, there's a very simple solution today, which is get yourself to a Holocaust Memorial Day event. There's about 11,000 of them going on around the country. The Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, our job is to make sure that people hear the stories and learn from them. There's plenty more resources online. If you read stories online, you read the story of an individual like Milena, and you hear what actually happened to one person. 6 million is a big figure, and it's really hard to get your head around. One person and hearing one person's story, again, whether it's from the Holocaust or from one of the other genocides, the patterns are so similar. Read the stories and hear what happened, and then there's all sorts of other resources.
And there are education programmes with people going to schools and talking to children, because that's where you need to start, isn't it?
Absolutely. But these figures, interesting, were adults. And so whilst children these days will learn more than adults maybe necessarily know, we need to make sure that the parents know too, and everybody knows these stories, because children will reflect what they hear at school, but also what they hear at home. And you come back to that figure of 5%. Now, we don't know that all 5%, all of those people are active Holocaust deniers, which is a very specific thing, people who are deliberately spreading misnews about what happened. What we know is 5% don't know. But within that 5% who don't know, not only will there be some deniers, but there'll be a susceptibility to hearing the stories of deniers. If you don't know, there's a vacuum there. And if people come along and compellingly tell you this didn't happen, or all sorts of other distortions that are out there, you're quite susceptible to it. So we need people to be better informed.
I think it's with you going to schools, Lady Milena, I think it's really important, isn't it? Because it's educating parents and families, yes, but that young generation.
I wish you could see the hundreds of letters that I get after my talks. And these are very often from, because I talk to 11 and 12-year-olds, and I have one that I take with me, which I read, because this child is saying, having heard my story, and she finishes off with, I now cherish my parents because I have parents to cherish. That's the last sentence. And that's an 11-year-old child who's written that. And I have those letters at home. And obviously, it's certainly getting through to the children.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Informing the next generation. Thank
indeed.
you for it. And thank you both for coming in to speak to us today on Holocaust Memorial Day. Thank you.
Now, coming up at 9 o'clock, it's Sophie Ridge on